Ralph Hicks jolts awake, immediately aware he's strapped down and about to be forcibly bred with an alien. Cold metal bites into his wrists and ankles as he struggles against unyielding restraints. Harsh light stabs his eyes in the sterile laboratory. Panic rises in his throat as the human diplomat takes in his surroundings. Stainless steel surfaces gleam under bright fluorescence. The acrid smell of disinfectant burns his nostrils. As his vision clears, Ralph notices rows of stasis pods lining the walls. His stomach drops as he realizes each contains an unconscious human. Heavy footsteps approach. A door hisses open, admitting a tall, willowy figure. Ralph's breath catches as he looks up at the Talaxian scientist. Despite her species' notorious ugliness, this female possesses an ethereal, alien beauty. Large almond eyes regard him with clinical interest. Iridescent scales shimmer across high cheekbones. "I am Tara," she says, voice melodic yet devoid of warmth. "You have been chosen to save my people." Ralph's diplomatic training kicks in. He keeps his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "I'm Ralph Hicks, Earth Ambassador. There's been a mistake. Release me immediately." Tara ignores his words, busying herself at a nearby console. The Talaxian race faces extinction. A genetic defect will render us sterile within a generation. But human DNA holds the key to our survival. Horror dawns as her meaning sinks in. Ralph renews his struggle against the restraints. "You can't do this. It's a violation of galactic law." She turns, regarding him with a hint of regret. "We have no choice. You will father the next generation of Talaxians." As Tara approaches with a syringe, alarms suddenly blare throughout the facility. She rushes to a monitor, scales paling. "Impossible," she breathes. "Human forces have breached our defenses." Hope surges in Ralph's chest. Rescue is coming. But as he looks at Tara's stricken face, he hesitates. His role as diplomat wars with his desire for freedom. Tara makes a decision. With swift movements, she releases his restraints. "Go," she urges. "But know that if you leave, my entire species will perish." Ralph stands, rubbing his wrists. Freedom is meters away. But can he condemn an alien race to extinction? As approaching footsteps echo down the corridor, he must decide, flee with his rescuers or stay and become the savior of the Talaxians. Ralph's mind raced as he stood frozen between Tara and the door. The approaching footsteps grew louder, each second ticking away his chance for escape. But as he looked into Tara's large pleading eyes, he saw more than just clinical interest. He saw desperation, fear, and a glimmer of hope. With a deep breath, Ralph made his decision. "I'll stay," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But we need to find a better solution than forced breeding." Relief washed over Tara's face, her iridescent scales shimmering with the change in her expression. "Thank you," she breathed. "We must hurry." She grabbed Ralph's hand, her touch cool and smooth against his skin, and led him swiftly to a hidden panel in the wall. As it slid open, revealing a narrow passageway, the laboratory door burst open behind them. "Ambassador Hicks," a gruff voice called out. "We're here to rescue you." Ralph and Tara ducked into the hidden chamber just as Commander Jack Hawkins and his team stormed into the lab. The panel closed silently behind them, plunging them into darkness. "This way," Tara whispered, guiding Ralph through the pitch-black corridor. Her night vision was far superior to his, and he stumbled along, relying entirely on her lead. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a softly lit room filled with holographic displays and data terminals. Ralph's eyes widened as he took in the vast array of information scrolling across the screens. "This is our genetic research database," Tara explained, her voice tight with urgency. "Everything we know about our condition and our attempts to find a cure is here." Ralph scanned the nearest display, his diplomatic training kicking in as he processed the information. "Your entire species is facing extinction?" he asked, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Tara nodded, her scales dimming slightly. "Within a generation, we'll be unable to reproduce. We've been working in secret, hoping to find a solution without alerting Earth to our desperation." As Ralph absorbed this information, a new sound caught his attention. The muffled voices of the rescue team growing closer. "They're searching the facility," he said. "It won't be long before they find us." Tara's eyes widened in panic. "If they discover the true nature of our experiments, it could lead to war between our peoples." Ralph's mind raced, weighing options and potential outcomes. His role as a diplomat warred with his personal feelings, but he knew he had to act fast. "I have an idea," he said, turning to Tara. "It's risky, but it might buy us some time." He quickly outlined his plan to present himself as a willing participant in a joint human-Talaxian research project. Tara listened intently, her expression a mix of hope and skepticism. "Do you really think they'll believe you?" she asked. Ralph managed a wry smile. "I'm a diplomat. Convincing people is what I do." As the voices grew closer, Tara nodded her agreement. "Very well, I trust you, Ralph." The use of his first name sent an unexpected thrill through him, but he pushed the feeling aside. There was no time for such thoughts now. "Stay here," he instructed. "I'll handle this." Ralph took a deep breath, steeling himself, then stepped out of the hidden chamber and into the main laboratory. Commander Hawkins and his team whirled around, weapons raised. "At ease, gentlemen," Ralph said, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "I appreciate the rescue effort, but I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding." Hawkins lowered his weapon slightly, confusion evident on his face. "Ambassador Hicks, what's going on here?" Ralph straightened his posture, slipping into his diplomatic persona. "Commander, I'm engaged in a highly sensitive joint research project with the Talaxians. My presence here is entirely voluntary." Hawkins's eyes narrowed. "We receive reports of humans being held against their will." "A regrettable miscommunication," Ralph said smoothly. "The project's secrecy led to some unfortunate assumptions. I assure you, everything is under control." As Ralph continued to explain his fabricated story, he could see doubt warring with respect for his position in Hawkins' eyes. Finally, the commander lowered his weapon completely. "I'll need to confirm this with Earth authorities," Hawkins said, his tone still skeptical. Ralph nodded, maintaining his composed facade. "Of course, I'll provide a full briefing once we've secured the facility and ensured the project's integrity." As Hawkins began issuing orders to his team, Ralph felt a mix of relief and trepidation. He'd bought them time, but now he was caught in a web of lies that could unravel at any moment. Tara emerged cautiously from the hidden chamber, her eyes darting between Ralph and the human soldiers. Ralph noticed Hawkins tense at her appearance, but he quickly stepped in. "Commander, allow me to introduce Tara, lead Talaxian researcher on our project," he said smoothly. "Tara, this is Commander Hawkins of Earth's Diplomatic Security Force." Tara inclined her head gracefully. "We appreciate Earth's concern for Ambassador Hicks' well-being," she said, her melodic voice carrying just the right note of formality. As the humans and Talaxians began a tense dialogue, Ralph caught Tara's eye. In that moment, something passed between them, a shared secret, a budding trust, and perhaps something more. Ralph knew the real challenge was just beginning. He had to find a way to actually help the Talaxians while maintaining his lie to Earth. And as he looked at Tara, he realized his growing feelings for her would only complicate matters further. The laboratory buzzed with activity as human and Talaxian forces established an uneasy truce. Ralph stood at the center of it all, keenly aware that the fate of two species now rested on his shoulders. He only hoped he was equal to the task. As the tense negotiations between humans and Talaxians continued, Ralph found himself walking a precarious tightrope. His diplomatic skills were stretched to their limits as he attempted to maintain the illusion of a joint research project while secretly working with Tara to find a solution to the Talaxian genetic crisis. Days turned into weeks, and the strain began to show. Commander Hawkins' piercing gaze followed Ralph's every move, his suspicion palpable. Ralph caught snippets of hushed conversations between the commander and his team. Their words permeated with doubt. In the laboratory, Ralph and Tara worked tirelessly, poring over genetic data and running countless simulations. Their hands would brush as they reached for the same tool, sending an electric current through Ralph's body. He found himself stealing glances at Tara, admiring the way her scales shimmered under the harsh laboratory lights. Tara seemed to sense his gaze. her large eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his breath catch. But they both knew the stakes were too high to indulge in their growing feelings. As they worked late one night, alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. Red emergency lights bathed the laboratory in an eerie glow. Tara's scales paled as she rushed to a nearby console. "It's Dr. Zorn," she gasped, her melodic voice tight with fear. "He and his radical faction have taken control of the station's systems." Before Ralph could respond, the laboratory doors slammed shut with a resounding clang. They were locked in. Dr. Zorn's face appeared on the main view screen, his features twisted with fanatical grit. "This charade has gone on long enough," he snarled. "We will save our species by any means necessary." Ralph's mind raced as he processed the implications. "They're going to reinstate the breeding program," he realized aloud, a cold dread settling in his stomach. Tara nodded grimly. "And they'll start with you, Ralph." The next hours were a blur of frantic activity. Ralph and Tara searched the laboratory for anything they could use to defend themselves or escape. They could hear the sounds of fighting echoing through the station as loyal Talaxian security forces clashed with Zorn's radicals. As they moved a heavy piece of equipment, a hidden compartment was revealed. Tara's eyes widened in recognition. "These are experimental gene therapy drugs my team was developing," she explained, carefully examining the vials. "We had to hide them when your rescue team arrived." Ralph's diplomatic mind immediately grasped the potential. "Could these be the solution we've been looking for?" Tara's scales rippled with excitement. "Possibly. Combined with some of your genetic material, they might cure our infertility without resorting to forced breeding." The sound of cutting torches at the laboratory doors spurred them into action. They knew they had only minutes before Zorn's followers broke through. "We have to try it," Ralph said, rolling up his sleeve. "Use me as the test subject." Tara shook her head. "It's too dangerous. The procedure is untested. It could kill you." Ralph took her hand, marveling at the contrast between her cool, scale skin and his own. "We don't have a choice. It's our only chance to stop this madness." Tara hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "We'll do it together," she said. "The procedure requires close physical contact to work effectively." As Tara prepared the gene therapy drugs, Ralph's heart raced. The situation was surreal. Locked in an alien laboratory, about to undergo an experimental procedure that could either save a species or end his life. Just as Tara was about to administer the drugs, the laboratory doors burst open. Dr. Zorn and his followers stormed in, their eyes wild with triumph. But the sight that greeted them stopped them in their tracks. Ralph and Tara were intertwined, the gene therapy drugs already coursing through their veins. The intimacy of their position was undeniable, a physical manifestation of the trust and connection that had grown between them. Dr. Zorn's followers muttered among themselves, clearly taken aback by the voluntary nature of what they were witnessing. Doubt crept into their eyes as they looked to their leader for guidance. In that moment of confusion, alarms blared once again. Commander Hawkins' voice echoed through the station's communication system. "This is Earth Security Forces. We have retaken control of the station. All personnel, stand down immediately." As chaos erupted around them, Ralph and Tara remained locked in their intimate embrace, the fate of two species hanging in the balance. The experimental procedure continued, its outcome uncertain. Ralph could feel changes occurring within his body, strange sensations rippling through him. Tara's eyes met his, filled with a mix of fear and hope. "Whatever happens," she whispered, her melodic voice strained, "know that I—" Her words were cut off as a wave of pain washed over them both. The gene therapy was taking effect, rewriting their very DNA. As they clung to each other, the world around them faded away. The shouts of Zorn's radicals, the approaching footsteps of Hawkins' team, all became distant background noise. In this moment of crisis, with the future of human-Talaxian relations hanging by a thread, Ralph and Tara's fates were irrevocably intertwined. The success or failure of their daring plan would shape the destiny of both their peoples. As consciousness began to slip away, Ralph's last coherent thought was of Tara. Whatever the outcome, he knew their lives would never be the same. the same. As darkness enveloped them, their bodies began to radiate a soft, pulsating light. The glow intensified, bathing the laboratory in an otherworldly aura. Ralph felt a tingling sensation spread from his core to his extremities, his very cells seeming to vibrate with energy. Tara's scales shimmered with an iridescent sheen, her form becoming fluid and ethereal. Outside the laboratory, the cacophony of battle reached a crescendo. The clash of weapons and shouts of combatants echoed through the station's corridors. Suddenly, the main doors burst open with a resounding crash. Commander Hawkins stormed in, flanked by his security team. Their weapons were raised, eyes scanning the room for threats. Dr. Zorn and his radical followers stumbled backward, caught between the advancing Earth forces and the loyal Talaxian security personnel who had been pursuing them. The chaotic standoff froze as all eyes were drawn to the laboratory doors. They slid open with a soft hiss, revealing Ralph and Tara emerging hand in hand. Their bodies still emitted a faint, pulsing light, casting dancing shadows across the stunned faces of those assembled. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Ralph's features had taken on subtle Talaxian characteristics. His skin had a faint, scale-like pattern, and his eyes held an alien luminescence. Tara's alien beauty had become even more pronounced, her form seeming to blend the best aspects of both species. Dr. Zorn's mouth fell open, his eyes wide with disbelief. The radical leader lowered his weapon, signaling his followers to stand down. What have you done?" he whispered, his voice a mix of awe and fear. Ralph stepped forward, his diplomatic instincts kicking in despite the lingering disorientation from the procedure. He squeezed Tara's hand, drawing strength from her presence. "What we've done," Ralph began, his voice carrying a new melodic quality, "is find a solution, a voluntary solution that could save your species without resorting to force or coercion." Commander Hawkins, his weapon still half raised, studied Ralph with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "Ambassador Hicks, is that really you?" Ralph nodded, meeting the commander's gaze steadily. "It is, Commander, and I can assure you, everything that's happened here has been of my own free will." Tara stepped forward, her voice harmonizing with Ralph's in an uncanny duet. "The experimental gene therapy has been successful beyond our wildest expectations. Our DNA has merged, creating a stable hybrid that could potentially solve our infertility crisis." The assembled groups murmured among themselves, the tension in the air slowly dissipating. Dr. Zorn approached cautiously, his earlier fanaticism replaced by scientific curiosity. "You mean this could work for all Talaxians?" "It's possible," Tara replied, "but we'll need to run more tests, refine the procedure. What Ralph and I have done is just the first step." Commander Hawkins lowered his weapon completely, tapping his communicator. "I need to report this to Earth immediately. This changes everything." As Hawkins relayed the situation to his superiors, Ralph and Tara were ushered to the station's medical bay. A team of human and Talaxian doctors swarmed around them, running scans and taking samples. Ralph lay on a biobed, the cold surface a stark contrast to the warmth still emanating from his altered body. He turned his head, seeking out Tara on the adjacent bed. Their eyes met, and suddenly he felt a wave of her emotions wash over him. Excitement, apprehension, and something deeper, more personal. "Can you feel that?" Tara's voice resonated in his mind, clear as crystal despite her lips not moving. Ralph's eyes widened. "I can. How is this possible?" "It seems our merger has created a telepathic bond," Tara replied, her mental voice tinged with wonder. "This is unprecedented." Their silent communication was interrupted by the arrival of a Talaxian in ornate robes, a member of the High Council. His scales shimmered with authority as he addressed the room. "The High Council has called an emergency meeting to discuss these developments," he announced. "Ambassador Hicks, Researcher Tara, your presence is required. We must determine the path forward for both our peoples." As Ralph and Tara prepared to face the High Council, news of their transformation spread through the station like wildfire. Humans and Talaxians alike gathered in the corridors, trying to catch a glimpse of the hybrid pair. Ralph could feel the weight of expectation settling on his shoulders. He knew that the next few hours would be crucial in shaping the future of human-Talaxian relations. As they approached the grand chamber of the High Council, he sensed a flicker of unease through his bond with Tara. "Aliwa, something doesn't feel right," she communicated silently. Ralph nodded imperceptibly, his newly enhanced senses on high alert. As the doors to the council chamber loomed before them, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far more dangerous than a mere political debate. Meeting. As the doors slid open, Ralph and Tara steeled themselves for what lay ahead. The High Council chamber was a grand circular room with tiered seating surrounding a central podium. Representatives from both human and Talaxian delegations filled the seats, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The air crackled with tension as Ralph and Tara made their way to the center. Ralph took a deep breath, his newly enhanced senses picking up subtle scents and sounds he'd never noticed before. He glanced at Tara, drawing strength from her presence. As they reached the podium, the chamber fell into a hushed silence. "Esteemed members of the High Council," Ralph began, his voice carrying a new melodic quality that seemed to captivate the audience. "We stand before you today with a solution that could change the course of both our species." As Ralph outlined the success of their experimental procedure, Tara projected supporting data onto the chamber's holographic displays. Murmurs of astonishment rippled through the crowd as they witnessed the results of their genetic fusion. "Our DNA has merged," Tara explained, her scales shimmering under the chamber's lights, "creating a stable hybrid that could potentially solve the Talaxian infertility crisis." The chamber erupted in excited chatter, but Ralph couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had been growing since they entered. He cast his gaze around the room, noting the positions of security personnel and exits. Suddenly, a series of violent explosions rocked the station. The chamber plunged into darkness as the main power cut out. Panic erupted as confused shouts filled the air. "Ralph, it's an attack!" Tara's voice rang clear in his mind. Before Ralph could respond, the emergency doors burst open. A group of armed individuals stormed in, their weapons trained on the council members and diplomats. "Nobody move!" a voice bellowed. As Ralph's eyes adjusted to the dim emergency lighting, he recognized the leader, Victor Kane, a notorious human extremist. Kane's eyes locked onto Ralph, a mix of disgust and triumph on his face. "So, this is what humanity has come to? Polluting our genes with alien filth?" Ralph felt a surge of anger, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the immediate threat. He sensed Tara's presence beside him, her mind linked with his as they assessed the situation. "We need to protect the council members," Ralph communicated silently. "Agreed. I'll take the left, you take the right," Tara responded. As Kane's followers spread out, Ralph and Tara sprang into action. With unprecedented synchronization, they moved through the chamber. Ralph's diplomatic training meshed seamlessly with Tara's knowledge of Talaxian physiology as they guided terrified council members to safety. Ralph found himself able to lift and move heavy debris with ease, his strength far beyond what it had been before the procedure. Tara displayed incredible agility, leaping over obstacles and dodging weapon fire with grace. As they worked to evacuate the chamber, the sounds of battle echoed through the station. Commander Hawkins' voice crackled over the emergency comm system, coordinating a counterattack against the extremists. In the chaos, Dr. Zorn appeared at Ralph's side, his earlier fanaticism replaced by a look of persistence. "I know a way to the secure command center," he shouted over the din. "We can regain control of the station's systems from there." Ralph nodded, communicating the plan to Tara through their mental link. As they made their way through the damaged corridors, Ralph was surprised to find he could breathe normally, despite the compromised life support systems. They fought their way through pockets of resistance, their enhanced abilities proving crucial in overcoming Kane's forces. Ralph's diplomatic skills came into play as they encountered groups of panicked civilians, his calming presence helping to prevent further chaos. Upon reaching the command center, they found it locked down. Dr. Zorn's expertise proved invaluable as he bypassed the security protocols, granting them access. Inside, Ralph and Tara worked in perfect tandem, their minds linked as they reactivated the station's defenses and established communication with both human and Talaxian reinforcements. Dr. Zorn's knowledge of the station's systems allowed them to coordinate a precise counterattack against Kane's remaining forces. As the tide of battle turned, Ralph felt a surge of hope, but their victory was short-lived. A transmission cut through their communications, Kane's face appearing on the main screen. "This ends now," Kane snarled, his weapon pressed against the head of a high-ranking Talaxian official. "Surrender yourself, Hicks, or watch as I execute this alien scum." Ralph's mind raced, weighing the consequences of his actions. He knew that giving himself up could undo all the progress they'd made, but the life of an innocent hung in the balance. "Ralph, wait," Tara's voice echoed in his mind. "I have an idea." As Tara outlined her plan, Ralph felt a mix of admiration and trepidation. It was dangerous, but it might be their only chance to save both the hostage and the fragile alliance between their species. With a nod to Dr. Zorn, who would coordinate from the command center, Ralph and Tara set out to confront Kane. As they moved through the station's corridors, now littered with the aftermath of battle, Ralph felt the weight of their mission pressing down on him. They approached the area where Kane was holding the hostage, their enhanced senses on high alert. Ralph could hear the rapid heartbeat of the Talaxian official, smell the acrid scent of fear in the air. Hand in hand, Ralph and Tara stepped into view, facing Victor Kane and his remaining followers. The extremist leader's eyes widened at the sight of them, his weapon wavering slightly. "What the hell are you?" Kane spat, disgust evident in his voice. Ralph squeezed Tara's hand, drawing strength from their bond. He met Kane's gaze steadily, his voice calm but resolute. "We are the future, Kane," Ralph said. "A future where our species don't just coexist, but thrive together." As Kane's grip on his hostage tightened, Ralph and Tara prepared to put their daring plan into action. The fate of human-Talaxian relations hung in the balance, with the next few moments promising to shape the course of interstellar history. Diplomacy. Time seemed to slow as Ralph and Tara locked eyes, their telepathic bond humming with shared willpower. Now, Tara's voice echoed in Ralph's mind. In a blur of synchronized movement, they sprang into action. Ralph's newly enhanced muscles coiled and released as he launched himself towards Kane's right flank. Simultaneously, Tara darted left, her scales shimmering as she moved with inhuman grace. Kane's followers, caught off guard by the sudden assault, fumbled with their weapons. Ralph's diplomatic training merged seamlessly with his augmented reflexes as he disarmed two extremists in rapid succession. Their guns clattered to the floor as he delivered precise strikes to incapacitate them. Tara, meanwhile, demonstrated her increased strength by grappling with a burly attacker twice her size. She used his momentum against him, flipping him over her shoulder and into two of his comrades. The tangle of bodies hit the ground with a resounding thud. Kane's eyes widened in disbelief as he watched his forces crumble before the hybrid pair. He tightened his grip on the Talaxian hostage, pressing the barrel of his weapon harder against the alien's temple. "Stay back, you freaks!" Kane snarled, his composure cracking. Before Ralph could respond, the chamber doors burst open. Commander Hawkins stormed in, leading a mixed squad of human and Talaxian security personnel. They fanned out, surrounding Kane's remaining followers with a ring of leveled weapons. "It's over, Kane," Hawkins barked. "Lower your weapon and release the hostage." Kane's eyes darted wildly around the room, searching for an escape route. Finding none, his face twisted into a mask of desperation. His free hand moved to his belt, fumbling with something hidden beneath his jacket. Ralph felt a surge of alarm through his bond with Tara. Her heightened senses had picked up on something he'd missed. "Ralph, he's got an explosive!" Tara's mental voice rang with urgency. Without hesitation, Ralph lunged forward. Time seemed to slow as he crossed the distance between himself and Kane. He could see the extremist's finger tightening on the detonator, could hear the rapid heartbeats of everyone in the room. Ralph's body slammed into Kane just as the device activated. He wrapped his arms around the human, using his own frame to shield the others from the impending blast. The last thing he saw was Tara's face, her eyes wide with fear and anguish. The explosion ripped through the chamber, sending shockwaves of heat and debris in all directions. The force of the blast threw Ralph and Kane against the far wall, where they crumpled to the ground in a heap of twisted limbs and torn clothing. As the dust began to settle, cries of pain and confusion filled the air. Tara pushed herself up from where she'd been knocked down, her ears ringing from the explosion. Her eyes frantically searched the room, finally locking on to Ralph's motionless form. "Ralph!" she cried out, scrambling over fallen debris to reach him. Commander Hawkins was already there, carefully rolling Ralph onto his back. The ambassador's body was battered and bloodied, but a weak groan escaped his lips as Tara knelt beside him. "He's alive," Hawkins confirmed, his voice tight with concern. "But we need medical assistance immediately." Tara placed her hands on Ralph's chest, her scientific mind racing to assess his injuries. She could feel the unique interplay of human and Talaxian biology within him, working overtime to keep him alive. "His hybrid physiology," she muttered, her voice filled with wonder, even in the midst of crisis. "It's providing some protection against the trauma, but he needs specialized care now." As if on cue, a team of medics burst into the chamber, pushing a hover stretcher. They worked quickly to stabilize Ralph and transfer him onto the stretcher. Tara never left his side, her hand clasped tightly in his as they rushed towards the medical bay. In the following hours, as Ralph underwent emergency treatment, news of the confrontation spread throughout the station. Members of the High Council gathered outside the medical bay, their faces etched with concern and gratitude for the hybrid diplomat who had saved them. When the chief medical officer finally emerged from the treatment room, his expression was one of cautious optimism. "Ambassador Hicks is stable," he announced to the assembled crowd. "His injuries were severe, but the unique properties of his hybrid physiology have greatly accelerated the healing process. With continued care, we expect a full recovery." A collective sigh of relief rippled through the gathered officials. The head of the Talaxian High Council stepped forward, his scales shimmering with emotion. In light of Ambassador Hicks's selfless actions and the extraordinary abilities demonstrated by both him and researcher Tara, he began, his voice carrying the weight of authority, the High Council has voted unanimously to approve the Human Talaxian Genetic Collaboration Program. Murmurs of surprise and approval spread through the crowd. The Talaxian leader continued, "We will establish a joint task force to oversee the program and ensure its ethical implementation. The potential benefits of this hybridization process are too great to ignore." As the implications of this decision began to sink in, Tara emerged from the medical bay. Her eyes were tired but filled with persistence. "Thank you for your support," she addressed the council members. "Ralph and I are living proof that our species can not only coexist but thrive together. This is just the beginning of what we can achieve." News of the events on the Talaxian space station spread rapidly, reaching both human and Talaxian worlds. Public opinion began to shift, with many hailing Ralph and Tara as heroes who had bridged the gap between their species. However, pockets of resistance remained, voicing concerns about the long-term consequences of genetic mixing. As Ralph began his recovery, Dr. Zorn approached Tara outside the medical bay. The fervor in his eyes had been replaced by a look of quiet grit. "I was wrong," he admitted, his voice low. "What you and Ralph have done, it's extraordinary. I want to help. If you'll have me, I'd like to volunteer as the next subject for the hybridization procedure." Tara studied him for a moment before nodding. "Your expertise would be invaluable, Dr. Zorn. We'll need to refine the process, make it safer for wider application. Are you prepared for the risks?" "I am," Zorn replied without hesitation. "It's time I contributed to a real solution instead of clinging to outdated fears." As they discussed the next steps, a group of human scientists led by Dr. Eleanor Reeves arrived at the station, eager to study Ralph and Tara's unique physiology. Their presence marked the beginning of a new chapter in human-Talaxian relations, one filled with both promise and uncertainty. Inside the medical bay, Ralph stirred, his enhanced senses gradually coming back online. He felt Tara's presence before he saw her, their mental link humming with shared relief and affection. As he opened his eyes, meeting her gaze, He knew that their journey was a long way to go. The true test of their bond and the future of their united species was just beginning. The challenges that lay ahead would test not only their determination, but the very foundations of human Talaxian cooperation. As Ralph's recovery progressed, plans for their diplomatic tour took shape. The station buzzed with activity as final preparations were made for their departure. Tara spent countless hours coordinating with Dr. Elena Reeves, who had been appointed as their scientific liaison on Earth. The day of their departure arrived. Ralph and Tara stood hand in hand on the observation deck, watching as the stars streaked by. Their first stop, Earth. "Are you ready for this?" Tara asked, her scales shimmering with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Ralph squeezed her hand, feeling the familiar warmth of their mental connection. "As ready as I'll ever be. We're in this together." As their ship entered Earth's atmosphere, the reality of their situation set in. Below them, the planet was a swirling mass of blue and green, punctuated by the glittering lights of sprawling cities. It was in those cities that their greatest challenges and opportunities awaited. The landing pad at the United Earth Government Headquarters in Geneva was a hive of activity. Security personnel formed a tight perimeter, their faces a mask of professional detachment. Beyond them, a sea of reporters jostled for position, cameras at the ready. As the ship's ramp lowered, Ralph and Tara emerged, blinking in the bright sunlight. The crowd fell silent for a moment, then erupted in a cacophony of shouted questions and flashing cameras. Dr. Elena Reeves pushed through the throng, her lab coat fluttering in the breeze. "Ambassador Hicks, researcher Tara, welcome to Earth," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Dr. Reeves. If you'll follow me, we have a lot to discuss." They made their way through the crowd, acutely aware of the mix of fascination and hostility in the eyes that followed them. Inside the government building, Dr. Reeves led them to a secure conference room. "I won't sugarcoat it," she began, her tone serious. "Public opinion is divided. Many are excited about the potential benefits of hybridization, but others—" She trailed off, gesturing to a screen displaying news footage of protests in major cities. Ralph watched as angry faces filled the screen. Signs bearing slogans like "Keep Earth Pure" and "No Alien DNA" waving in the air. He felt a pang of disappointment, but not surprise. "We expected some resistance," he said, turning to Tara, "but we've faced worse." Tara nodded, her expression determined. "We'll show them what we can do. Actions speak louder than words." Over the next few days, Ralph and Tara embarked on a whirlwind of public appearances and scientific demonstrations. At a packed auditorium in New York, Ralph walked barefoot across a bed of hot coals, his hybrid physiology granting him unprecedented resistance to extreme temperatures. The crowd gasped in amazement as he emerged unscathed, not a blister in sight. In Tokyo, Tara dazzled a gathering of the world's top scientists by solving complex mathematical equations faster than the most advanced supercomputers. Her enhanced cognitive abilities left the audience speechless, sparking intense discussions about the potential applications of such mental prowess. As word of their demonstrations spread, the tide of public opinion began to shift. Volunteers for the hybridization program surged, with thousands eager to unlock their own hidden potential. But not everyone was convinced. As Ralph and Tara prepared for a crucial meeting with world leaders in London, news broke of a series of coordinated attacks on research facilities associated with the program. "Pure Earth," Dr. Reeves explained, her face grim as she briefed them on the situation. "A radical anti-hybridization group. They've destroyed labs in Beijing, Nairobi, and Sao Paulo. We've received intel that they're planning more attacks." Ralph felt a surge of grit. "We can't let them derail everything we've worked for. Tara, are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Tara's eyes met his, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Always." Over the next week, Ralph and Tara found themselves thrust into the role of protectors. Using their enhanced abilities and their ever-strengthening mental bond, they thwarted Pure Earth attacks in Mumbai, Sydney, and Berlin. In Mumbai, Ralph's heightened reflexes allowed him to disarm a bomber moments before he could detonate his explosives in a crowded marketplace. In Sydney, Tara's increased strength enabled her to hold up a collapsing building long enough for trapped scientists to escape. But it was in Berlin that their teamwork truly shone. As Pure Earth operatives attempted to release a toxic gas into the ventilation system of a hybridization research center, Ralph and Tara worked in perfect synchronization. Their telepathic bond had evolved, allowing them to share sensory experiences. Through Tara's eyes, Ralph navigated the twisting corridors of the facility's basement, while Tara used Ralph's enhanced sense of smell to pinpoint the location of the gas canisters. They neutralized the threat with seconds to spare, emerging from the building to the cheers of grateful onlookers. As cameras flashed and reporters clamored for statements, Ralph and Tara stood united, their hands clasped tightly together. The next day, as they prepared for their meeting with world leaders, Ralph and Tara discovered a new depth to their connection. As they rehearsed their presentation, they found they could silently coordinate their responses, perceiving the world through each other's senses. "This could change everything," Tara whispered, her eyes wide with excitement. Ralph nodded, feeling a mix of awe and trepidation. "Let's hope it's enough to convince them." As they entered the grand hall where the world's most powerful leaders had gathered, Ralph and Tara knew that the fate of human-Talaxian relations hung in the balance. Their enhanced senses picked up on the tension in the room, the rapid heartbeats and whispered conversations. Taking a deep breath, they stepped forward, ready to make their case for a future where humans and Talaxians could truly become one. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on the hybrid couple as they began their presentation, their minds and hearts perfectly in sync. Their mental link hummed with shared purpose as they stepped forward to address the assembled leaders. Suddenly, a piercing alarm shattered the moment. Red emergency lights bathed the room in an eerie glow as Commander Hawkins' voice crackled over the intercom, urgent and strained. "Ambassador Hicks, researcher Tara, we have a critical situation. Pure Earth forces have launched an assault on the Talaxian space station. They're attempting to destroy the hybridization research and eliminate the hybrid couples. We need you back immediately." Ralph and Tara exchanged a swift glance, their enhanced senses already picking up on the rising tension in the room. Without hesitation, they turned to the world leaders. "We must go," Ralph announced, his voice steady, despite the gravity of the situation. "The future we've been discussing is under attack. We ask for your support and cooperation in the face of this threat." As murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly, Tara added, "We'll return to continue this dialogue. The choice between fear and progress lies before us all." Within minutes, they were aboard a high-speed transport, hurtling through space toward the Talaxian station. The journey, though brief, felt agonizingly long. Ralph and Tara used the time to formulate a plan, their mental link allowing for rapid, wordless communication. As they approached the station, the extent of the damage became clear. Explosions rocked the structure, plumes of debris drifting in the void of space. Their ship weaved through the chaos, expertly piloted by Commander Hawkins herself. "We're docking now," Hawkins informed them, her voice tight with concentration. "Be ready for anything." The moment the airlock sealed, Ralph and Tara sprang into action. The station's corridors were a maze of smoke and flashing emergency lights. Distant sounds of weapons fire and shouted orders echoed through the halls. "We need to split up," Ralph said, his enhanced senses already mapping out the quickest routes. "I'll lead a team to defend the research facilities. You head to the medical bay, protect the other hybrid couples and Dr. Zorn." Tara nodded, her scales shimmering with dedication. "Be careful. Our bond will keep us connected." They shared a brief, intense look before parting ways. Ralph gathered a group of security personnel, their faces a mix of fear and persistence. As they moved through the station, Ralph's diplomatic instincts kicked in. He offered words of encouragement, bolstering their spirits even as they encountered pockets of resistance. Rounding a corner, Ralph came face to face with a sight that made his blood run cold. Victor Kane, the man he thought safely in custody, stood at the head of a group of Pure Earth extremists. Kane's eyes, filled with a familiar hatred, locked onto Ralph. "Well, well," Kane sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "The abomination returns." Ralph's muscles tensed, ready for the fight he knew was coming. "It doesn't have to be this way, Kane. We can find a solution that benefits everyone. Kane's response was a furious charge. The two met in a clash of enhanced strength and agility, their movements almost too fast for the human eye to follow. Ralph's security team engaged the other Pure Earth members, the narrow corridor erupting into a chaotic battlefield. As Ralph grappled with Kane, he tried to reach the man beneath the hatred. Think about what you're doing, Victor. This isn't about purity, it's about fear. Fear of change, fear of the unknown. Kane's fist connected with Ralph's jaw, sending him staggering. You know nothing of fear, Kane spat. You've betrayed your own kind. Meanwhile, Tara raced toward the medical bay, her enhanced speed allowing her to outpace the Talaxian purists who had infiltrated the station. As she approached her destination, she could hear the sounds of struggle ahead. The scene that greeted her was one of chaos. A group of Talaxian extremists was attempting to breach the medical bay doors, where the other hybrid couples and Dr. Zorn had barricaded themselves. Tara's mind raced, analyzing the situation with her heightened intellect. She spotted a nearby maintenance panel and quickly formulated a plan. With her increased strength, she tore the panel free and began ripping out circuitry. Hey, she shouted, drawing the attention of the attackers. You want to destroy the future? You'll have to go through me first. As the Talaxian purists turned to face her, Tara used her scientific knowledge to jury-rig the circuitry into a makeshift electromagnetic pulse device. With a burst of energy, she activated it, temporarily disabling the attackers' weapons. Taking advantage of their confusion, Tara charged forward, her hybrid physiology granting her a significant advantage in the ensuing hand-to-hand combat. As she fought, she called out to those inside the medical bay. Dr. Zorn, it's Tara. We need to fortify this position. The doors slid open just enough for Tara to slip inside. Dr. Zorn, his own features now a blend of human and Talaxian, nodded grimly. I've been working on something that might help, he said, gesturing to a set of hastily assembled devices. Adaptive force fields. They should buy us some time. As Tara and Dr. Zorn worked to secure the medical bay, Ralph continued his battle with Kane. The two were evenly matched, their enhanced abilities turning the fight into a brutal test of endurance. Listen to me, Victor, Ralph panted, dodging a vicious strike. I've seen what we can become together, the potential for growth, for understanding. We don't have to be enemies. Kane faltered for a moment, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. You really believe that? Ralph saw his opening, both physical and emotional. I do. Let me show you. In a move that caught Kane completely off guard, Ralph deliberately lowered his defenses. He stood, arms at his sides, completely vulnerable. This is trust, Victor. This is what we can achieve when we stop fighting each other. Kane's fist, already in motion, stopped mere inches from Ralph's face. The two men stood frozen, the sounds of battle fading around them as they locked eyes. In that moment, something shifted in Kane's expression. A realization, a crack in the armor of his hatred. Before either could speak, a new voice cut through the tension. Ambassador Hicks, we've arrived with reinforcements. Dr. Eleanor Reeves and Dr. Aria Voss burst onto the scene, flanked by a team of human and Talaxian security forces. In Dr. Voss's hands was a case containing what appeared to be medical equipment. We've done it, Dr. Voss announced, her eyes shining with excitement. A safe, rapidly deployable version of the hybridization process. We can administer it as a vaccine to willing volunteers from both species. The news sent shockwaves through both the defenders and the attackers. Kane, his hand still raised, looked from Ralph to the case and back again. The weight of the moment, the potential for a truly united future, hung in the air. Ralph, keeping his eyes locked on Kane, spoke softly but firmly. The choice is yours, Victor. We can end this now. We can build something greater than either of us imagined. Kane's hands slowly lowered, his expression a complex mix of emotions. The sounds of fighting throughout the station began to die down as word of the breakthrough spread. In the medical bay, Tara received the news through her mental link with Ralph. She turned to Dr. Zorn and the other hybrid couples, a smile of relief and hope spreading across her face. It's happening, she said, her voice filled with wonder. We're on the brink of a new era. As the chaos on the station began to subside, Ralph and Tara's thoughts turned to the future. A future that now seemed brighter and more inclusive than ever before. But they knew that the path ahead would require careful navigation, diplomacy, and a continued commitment to understanding and cooperation between their two species. The hybrid couple stood united, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, their bond stronger than ever. As they prepared to address the station's inhabitants and share the news of the breakthrough, they knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in human-Talaxian relations, one that held the promise of unprecedented growth and unity for both civilizations.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.